Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Glass shattered against the imported marble floor, the sharp sound echoing like a gunshot through the terrifying silence of the penthouse office. Get out. The voice was low, a rumble of subterranean thunder that vibrated in the chests of everyone present, more terrifying than a scream. If he does not eat, you do not get paid. You are lucky I don't ruin your career permanently for incompetence. 3 Michelin star chefs, grown men with egos the size of skyscrapers, scrambled out of the double mahogany doors, their faces drained of blood. In the center of the room, standing amidst the wreckage of a rejected foie gras platter, stood Julian Vane. He was a man carved from ice and arrogance, a prime alpha whose mere pheromones could force lesser men to their knees. But right now, the CEO of Vane Enterprises wasn't looking at a balance sheet. He was staring at a small, trembling figure curled into the corner of a velvet sofa. His 5-year-old son, Leo. The boy was skeletal, his eyes too big for his pale face, staring at the floor with a hollow detachment that terrified his father more than any corporate takeover. Julian ran a hand through his dark hair, his composure fracturing. "Leo," he said, his voice straining to find a gentle cadence foreign to his nature. "Please, just one bite." The boy didn't move. He hadn't eaten a full meal in 3 weeks, surviving on 4 drips in spite. Outside the glass walls of the office, in the open-plan bullpen of the finance department, Ezra quietly packed his bag. He was invisible here, a beta-presenting employee in a company dominated by aggressive alphas. In reality, Ezra was a recessive omega, suppressing his scent with heavy-duty blockers because he couldn't afford the harassment that came with his secondary gender. He wasn't rich, he wasn't powerful, and he certainly didn't belong on the executive floor. He was only up here to deliver a misdirected file. He should have left. He should have run the moment the chefs fled. But through the glass, he saw the child. Ezra knew that look. It wasn't just stubbornness, it was a trauma response. A sensory rejection of the world. Clutching his own humble lunchbox, a plastic container wrapped in a faded blue cloth, Ezra hesitated. His instincts, usually dormant under layers of suppressants, screamed at him. The pup is starving. Before his logical brain could stop him, Ezra pushed open the heavy glass door. The air inside was thick with the scent of distressed alpha, ozone, and burning cedar. It was suffocating. Julian whipped around, his eyes narrowing into predatory slits. "Who are you?" Julian snarled. "I set everyone out." "He doesn't want fancy food," Ezra said, his voice trembling but his feet planted firmly. He ignored the alpha's crushing aura, focusing entirely on the boy. The smell? It's too much for him. Truffles, heavy creams. They smell like rot when you're anxious. Julian took a step forward, looming over Ezra. "And you are? A nutritionist?" "A doctor. I'm an analyst from Sector 4, Ezra admitted, clutching his lunchbox tighter. "But I know what it's like to be afraid to eat." Julian looked ready to throw him out the window, but Leo stirred. The boy's nose twitched. Ezra didn't wait for permission. He walked past the most powerful man in the city and knelt before the sofa. He didn't force the food. He simply unwrapped the cloth and popped the lid of the plastic container. Inside wasn't gold leaf steak or caviar. It was simple, home-cooked comfort. Fluffy white rice shaped into small, friendly pandas, steamed broccoli seasoned lightly with sesame oil, and tender strips of chicken glazed in a sweet, mild soy sauce. But the secret wasn't the food, it was the faint, soothing residual scent on the container. Even through his suppressants, Ezra's natural pheromones, warm vanilla and spiced cardamom, clung to the objects he touched. "It's just rice," Ezra whispered to the boy, ignoring the alpha hovering behind him like the executioner's axe. "See? The panda is sleeping." Leo lifted his head. His dark, hollow eyes met Ezra's warm amber ones. The smell of ozone was overwhelming, but underneath it, the boy smelled safety. He smelled something sweet. Leo reached out, his small hand shaking. He picked up a rice ball. Julian held his breath. The room went dead silent. Leo took a bite. Then another. Then, with a ferocity that broke Julian's heart, the boy began to shovel the food into his mouth, making small, desperate noises. "Slowly," Ezra murmured, rubbing small circles on the boy's back. a familiarity that would have gotten anyone else killed by Julian. You'll get a tummy ache. Julian watched, stunned. He had spent thousands on private chefs, doctors, and specialists. And here was a random analyst in a cheap suit, feeding his son out of Tupperware. When the box was empty, Leo didn't pull away. He slumped forward, his forehead resting against Ezra's chest, clutching Ezra's lapel with a sticky hand. "Thank you," Leo whispered, his voice rusty from disuse. Ezra smiled softly, brushing a stray hair from the boy's forehead. "You're welcome, little one." "Get up," Julian said. Ezra flinched, remembering where he was. He gently detangled himself from the boy, who immediately let out a whine of protest. Ezra stood, keeping his head bowed. "I apologize for the intrusion, sir. I'll leave." "You aren't going anywhere," Julian said, walking back to his desk and pressing a button on his intercom. "Security, bring my car around. And have HR prepare a new contract." "Sir." Ezra blinked. I don't understand. Am I fired?" Julian turned, his icy blue eyes assessing Ezra with a terrifying intensity. He looked at the empty lunchbox, then at his son, who was watching Ezra with wide, fearful eyes. "Pack your things," Julian commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You are no longer an analyst. You are moving into the Vane estate. Effective immediately. I can't just—" "Name your price," Julian cut him off, pulling a checkbook from his jacket. "Triple your salary? Quadruple? My son ate for the first time in a month because of your— whatever that was. You are coming with me." It wasn't a job offer. It was an abduction with a paycheck. The Vane estate was less a home and more a mausoleum of glass and steel perched on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly devoid of life. Ezra was given a suite in the East Wing, connected to the kitchens. For the first week, he existed in a state of high-anxiety surrealism. He cooked 3 meals a day. He spent hours coaxing Leo to eat, playing quiet games with him in the sunroom, and trying to avoid the master of the house. The dynamic was strange. Julian Vane was a ghost in his own home. He left before dawn and returned after midnight, smelling of stress and whiskey. He was a provider, a protector, but he didn't know how to be a father. He watched Leo from a distance, as if afraid his own darkness would infect the boy. The turning point came on a Tuesday, during a thunderstorm. Ezra was in the kitchen, prepping a mild stew, when the power flickered. The storm outside was raging, mirroring the chaotic energy that seemed to perpetually swirl around the Vane family. A scream tore through the house. Ezra dropped the ladle and ran. He sprinted up the grand staircase, his heart hammering. He knew that scream. He burst into Leo's room. The boy was thrashing in his bed, tangled in the sheets, sobbing in the grip of a night terror. No, don't go," Leo shrieked. Ezra didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the bed, pulling the small, shaking body into his arms. "Shoo, Leo. It's okay. I'm here. Ezra is here." He released his scent control. It was risky, dangerous, even in an alpha's territory, but the boy needed it. The room filled with the heavy, comforting aroma of warm vanilla, honey, and cardamom. It acted like a tranquilizer. Leo's thrashing stopped. He buried his face in Ezra's neck, inhaling deeply, his sobs turning into hiccups. "I've got you." Ezra hummed a low melody, rocking him back and forth. The door creaked open. Julian stood there, silhouetted by the hallway light. He was soaked, having just returned from the storm, his shirt clinging to his muscular frame. His eyes were wide, pupils blown black. The scent hit him like a physical blow. Omega. Ezra froze, clutching Leo tighter. He hadn't told Julian. He had lied on his employment forms. "Sir, Julian took a step into the room, his movements slow, dazed. The scent wasn't just pleasant, it was biological gravity. It pulled at the beast inside him, the alpha that had been starving for a mate just as his son had been starving for food. "You're an Omega," Julian rasped, his voice rough. "I'm sorry," Ezra whispered, terrified. "I needed the job. I take suppressants. I won't let it affect my work." "Daddy." The word hung in the air, fragile and confusing. Julian's breath hitched. He looked at his son. But Leo wasn't looking at him. Leo was looking at Ezra, clutching Ezra's shirt with white-knuckled fists. "Daddy, don't let the monsters come back." Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Ezra went pale. "Leo, no? I'm not. Julian stared at the tableau before him. His son, who hadn't called him daddy since his mother died 2 years ago, was bestowing that title on this employee. This liar. This Omega who smelled like heaven. Jealousy, hot and acidic, flared in Julian's chest. But beneath it was something else. Shame. And a twisted sense of relief. He's sleep-talking, Ezra stammered, his eyes wide with panic as Julian approached the bed. He doesn't mean it, sir. He's confused. Julian stopped at the edge of the bed. He looked down at them. The domesticity of it, the Omega curling around his pup, protecting him, triggered instincts Julian thought were dead. Stay with him, Julian commanded, his voice tight. Sir. He's sleeping, Julian said, gesturing to Leo, whose eyes were drooping, lulled by Ezra's scent. If you move, he wakes up. Stay. Julian turned and walked out, slamming the door shut behind him. Ezra didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, the sleeping child heavy on his chest, terrified of what the morning would bring. The morning brought silence, but the atmosphere had shifted. The air in the mansion was charged with static electricity. Julian didn't fire him. Instead, he began to watch. He came home early. He sat at the head of the dining table while Ezra fed Leo, his dark eyes tracking every movement of Ezra's hands, every smile Ezra gave the boy. The predatory gaze was no longer just about suspicion, it was about possession. Why do you hide it? Julian asked one evening. It was late. Leo was asleep. Ezra was in the kitchen, cleaning up. Julian was leaning against the doorframe, a glass of scotch in his hand. He had loosened his tie, exposing the column of his throat. Ezra scrubbed a plate harder. Hide what, sir? Your nature. Your scent. Julian walked into the kitchen, the space suddenly feeling very small. It's potent. It's a liability, Ezra said quietly, not looking up. In my field, Omegas aren't taken seriously. We're seen as delicate. Distractions. You are a distraction, Julian murmured, closing the distance. He stood directly behind Ezra. Ezra could feel the heat radiating off the alpha. I haven't been able to focus on a single merger all week because my house smells like you. Ezra turned around, backed against the sink. I can increase my dosage. I can leave if you leave, my son starves, Julian said, placing a hand on the counter on either side of Ezra, trapping him. And if you increase your dosage, you'll hurt yourself. He leaned down, burying his nose in the crook of Ezra's neck. Ezra gasped, his knees buckling. The intake of breath from the alpha was intimate, bordering on scandalous. Vanilla and cardamom, Julian groaned, his voice vibrating against Ezra's skin. And fear. Why are you afraid of me, Ezra? Because you're Julian Vane, Ezra whispered, his heart pounding against his ribs. And you look at me like I'm the next meal. Julian pulled back slightly, his eyes burning with blue fire. Maybe I am starving, too. The moment was shattered by the ring of the doorbell. Not the service bell, but the front gate intercom. Julian pulled away, his expression instantly hardening into his CEO mask. Who comes here at this hour? He checked the monitor on the wall. His face went dark. Mother. Ezra felt a chill. Eleanor Vane. The matriarch. She was notorious in the business world, a woman who believed blood purity and status were more important than oxygen. Stay here, Julian ordered. Do not come out. Julian left the kitchen. Ezra stood trembling, washing his hands over and over. He could hear voices in the foyer. Sharp, high-pitched tones of a woman and the low rumble of Julian. Unacceptable, Julian. A male Omega? Working as a nanny? The rumors are already starting. He is a nutritionist, mother. And Leo is healthy. That is all that matters. He is a lowborn stray. I saw his file. No family name, no connections. He is using pheromones to manipulate the boy. And you. Look at you, you reek of him. Enough. No. I have found a suitable governess. She is from the Rothschild line. She starts tomorrow. Get rid of the stray. I said no. The argument escalated. Ezra shrank into the corner of the kitchen. He knew this story. The rich family, the unsuitable servant. He was foolish to let himself get comfortable. Foolish to let Leo call him daddy. Foolish to let Julian smell his neck. The kitchen door swung open. Eleanor Vane stood there. She was small, impeccable, and looked at Ezra as if he were a roach on her shoe. So this is him, she sneered. Pack your bags. Mother, get out. Julian roared from the hallway. I am doing this for your own good. Eleanor snapped. She turned to Ezra. How much? How much to leave my son and grandson alone? 10,000. 50. Ezra looked at Julian. The alpha looked furious, veins bulging in his neck, but he was hesitating. Why? Because she was his mother? Or because deep down, he knew she was right? Ezra was a nobody. A sudden clarity washed over Ezra. He wasn't doing this for money. He loved Leo. And, God help him, he was falling for the broken, terrifying man who was currently warring with his own family. I don't want your money, Ezra said softly. Then what do you want? To be the mistress? Eleanor laughed cruelly. Do you think he could ever love you? He is a king. You are a servant. Get out. Julian grabbed his mother's arm, physically dragging her toward the door. If you ever speak to him again, I will cut you off from the trust. Do you understand me? Eleanor went pale. She wrenched her arm free. You will regret this, Julian. He is a weakness. And you cannot afford weaknesses. She stormed out. The front door slammed, shaking the house. Silence returned, but it was brittle now. Julian turned to Ezra. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had fought a war and lost. I'm sorry, Julian said. It was the first time the great dragon had ever apologized to anyone. She's right, isn't she? Ezra asked, his voice breaking. I don't belong here. No. Julian walked back to him. He didn't trap him this time. He stood in front of him, offering his hands palms up. A gesture of submission. She's wrong. You're the only thing that makes this house a home. You're the only reason Leo smiles. You're the only reason I breathe. Ezra stared at the large, calloused hands. Julian. When Leo called you daddy, Julian confessed, his voice rough with emotion. I wasn't angry because he replaced me. I was angry because I wanted it to be true. I wanted us to be that. A family. The admission hung in the air, raw and bleeding. I have a dinner gala tomorrow, Julian said. The annual shareholders' ball. Usually, I go alone. It's where I announce the year's direction. Ezra nodded, confused by the change of subject. Come with me, Julian said. Not as the help. As my partner. Julian, that's suicide. The board. Your mother. Let them talk. Julian stepped closer, cupping Ezra's face in his hands. The touch was electric. Let them see. I am done hiding. I am done starving. He leaned down and kissed Ezra. It wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming. It tasted of whiskey and desperation and promise. Ezra melted into him, his hands gripping Julian's suit jacket, his scent flaring wild and sweet, wrapping around the alpha like a vine. The shareholders' ball was a Shark Tank in tuxedos. When Julian Vane walked in, the room went quiet. When they saw the Omega on his arm, the silence turned to murmurs. Ezra wore a suit Julian had tailored for him, deep midnight blue velvet that made his skin glow. He was terrified, trembling slightly. Chin up, Julian whispered, guiding him through the crowd with a hand firmly on his lower back. You own this room because you own me. They moved through the throng. The stares were judgmental, piercing. Eleanor Vane was there, watching from a balcony like a vulture, sipping champagne. But then, something happened. A waiter dropped a tray near them. The crash was loud. Ezra didn't flinch. But Julian did, a subtle tightening of his jaw, a flash of defensive aggression. Ezra immediately, instinctively, placed a hand on Julian's chest, right over his heart, and released a pulse of calming pheromones. It's okay, Ezra whispered. Just a glass. Julian's shoulders dropped. He leaned into the touch, his eyes softening. The room saw it. They saw the monster of Wall Street tamed by a touch. They saw the intimacy. It wasn't a scandal. It was a power dynamic shift that no one could have predicted. Later that night, back at the estate, they checked on Leo. The boy was asleep, clutching a plush panda Ezra had bought him. They stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around each other. He ate his whole dinner tonight, Ezra whispered. He told me he wants to learn how to make the rice balls. Julian rested his chin on Ezra's head. We can teach him. Together. He turned Ezra around, pressing him against the doorframe, his expression intense. You saved him, Ezra. And you saved me. I just made lunch. Ezra smiled, tears in his eyes. No, Julian corrected, lifting Ezra into his arms and carrying him toward the master bedroom. You fed a starving family. And now, it's my turn to feed you. The bedroom door closed, shutting out the cold world, leaving only the warmth of vanilla, cedar, and a love that was no longer forbidden, but essential. And that is how the dragon learned that the greatest power wasn't in devouring the world, but in being fed by the one who held his heart. If you enjoyed seeing Julian surrender his control for love, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven the mother-in-law, or would you have demanded Julian cut her off completely? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men and 1 child. BL, Yaoi, man 1. Julian, tall alpha CEO, sharp jawline, black hair, piercing blue eyes, wearing unbuttoned dress shirt and vest, looking tenderly at child. Man 2. Ezra, smaller omega, soft brown hair, gentle expression, wearing apron over casual clothes, holding a bento box. Child. Leo, small boy, pale, holding a plush panda, sitting between them eating a rice ball. Background is a modern luxury kitchen with marble island, warm lighting, emotional atmosphere, cinematic composition, intricate details, soft glow.